Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Time now for our legal slot. We're here in Nina, and Rosemary Lynch of Lynch Solicitors is in our Clonmel studio. Good morning to you, Rosemary.
Good morning, Fran. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, and good to talk to you today. You're going to talk to us about aspects of sale and purchase transactions, I know, Rosemary. What role has the solicitor in those transactions?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, and the reason why I decided to cover it today is that there seems to be a bit of a misconception with people, whether they're, I suppose, buying or selling, on what happens after you go sale agreed. From their perspective, obviously, there's a lot involved in that, that the auctioneer does. So they think then that it should be a fairly quick process afterwards, right? But the reality is, if I'm acting for someone that's purchasing and they say to me, okay, great, we're sale agreed, how long is it going to take? And my answer is always the same, and it depends whether the seller actually went to their solicitor in advance of putting it on the market, and their solicitor has had the time to really get things into place, because there's a good few issues actually that tend to delay a conveyance, so a sale, a purchase or a transfer as well, if you're transferring to a child.
And what are those delays? Because I know every case is very, very individual, Rosemary, but what are the general delays? Yeah,
I suppose the first one is title deeds. So title deeds are just your proof of ownership of a property, and you say, oh yeah, sure, that should be easy. And yes, it is, but it can still cause a delay, okay? So if you're selling and you have a mortgage, you don't actually hold your own physical title deeds, all right? It's always the lender that holds them. They hold them kind of as security, so people can't go ahead then and sell their property without paying off their mortgage. But also, if you don't have a mortgage, right, and this is the more worrying scenario, they should be at home or safe somewhere. And then it depends, right, because some people will say, are these my title deeds? There's only a page or two with them. And that can be the case if it's registered title. But if it's unregistered title and you've lost your deeds, you're in a kind of a very tricky situation where you have to go through this old system of registration and searches on that to kind of reconstruct the title. So the number one thing, other than obviously if you're thinking about selling your property, make sure you go and speak to your solicitor in time, is to try and dig out your title deeds as soon as possible.
In our case, the bank lost our title deeds, now they eventually found them, but there was a big panic for a long time. And as you point out, it could be very, very serious, couldn't it? It
can be very serious. And look, even if they don't lose your deeds, to be honest, at the moment, it's taking about 10 weeks to actually get them released, right? So if you think about it, people are very excited. They've just gone sale agreed, and then you have to say, well, actually, you're 10 weeks before any real work can start, right? Because you need to see what's in the deeds, because in addition to deeds, if you've seen your own deeds, Fran, you'll see that usually things like planning and different bits and pieces will go along with it. And of course, a solicitor can't issue any contracts or anything like that until they've actually seen the deeds. And then I'm sorry that you had that panic, because to be honest, I have the same panic if people tell me I can't find the deeds, because it is an awful palaver if you can't find them. As I said, you're reconstructing title. You're also, looking at like, what are the planning documents that should be there? Can we access them? Do we have to do a planning search? Do we know who the engineer was that certified the planning? All of that. So there's a good bit of work in that. So I would just recommend everybody just mentally think about, do I know where my deeds are? If you have a mortgage there with your lender, if you don't have a mortgage, have a look to make sure they're safe. Most solicitors will, hold your deeds for you in storage if you ask them to.
Another issue we came across as well was boundary lines. I presume that is a big hold-up for you, is it?
Boundary lines really tends to irritate people, right? For a whole host of reasons.
Yes.
But one of them is, as I said to you, there's two kind of systems of registration. The old system, right? and that is basically a registry of deeds. It was just a register. All they did is they registered the deed itself, right? So they don't hold copies of maps or anything like that, right? And then you have the new system, which absolutely is superior to it. Anybody can go online and go, okay, great, I can't find my folio, which is the document evidencing ownership now. Grand, I can download one, right? And now I can prove my ownership. Right, so it's state-backed ownership. They guarantee that you own that property. What they don't guarantee and what they're not conclusive of is boundaries. All right.
Yeah.
So it's a funny thing, right? Because if you look at somebody's title online, as I said, through the new system of registration, and you go, okay, grand, this is your property, and they'll go, oh no, that's not the shape of my property, or there's a bit here, or there's a bit there, right? So what you could be looking at then is, depends how well you get on with your neighbours, really. You should hope fairly well, right? Because if there is a boundary issue and you go to sell, if there's something crucial on the boundary, like services, or even if the boundaries are just completely don't reflect the position on the ground, you might need to go to the neighbour or whoever I suppose is registered on that portion and do a deed of rectification. And that's just basically one deed saying, look, this property should actually be on my title, but it's on my neighbour's title, and the neighbour signs and says, yeah, I agree with that, and let's get that rectified. The boundaries, when they become really sticky, obviously, right, is if there was an intention by the neighbour to encroach. All right. So that can happen a number of ways, and it can happen naturally as well. People when they're readjusting fences and whatnot, they can accidentally do it. But sometimes it's an intentional encroachment, and that's when you're into adverse possession. And as I said, if there's anything germane or central to the property on that piece of land, it can cause a real issue. Because I think when people talk about adverse possession and they talk about, what most people, when they're ringing in, they talk about squatters' rights, which is adverse possession. Yeah. They always think really of the more obvious one, which is, there's a vacant property and somebody's gone in situ, and, it's a house kind of scenario. Whereas actually in reality, specifically in the countryside, there's a lot of adverse possession that just happens by, people basically erecting a fence, or they own the land next door and they go up and they reshift the boundaries on the ground.
It's interesting. Tax implications, does that come into the transactions as well, do you think, Rosemary?
Well, tax implications, I tell you, Fran, when I was in law school and I was here and I was learning about the theory of land law and everything like that, I didn't realise until I went into the office that there was all of these other bits, and tax was one of them. And I remember thinking, geez, we have to make sure that these people are paying their local property tax. And there also used to be, NPPR and other taxes as well. But yeah, you cannot sell property. You can't close the sale unless all of the local property tax is paid, right? So that can be a big one if you think about it, right? Because in some instances, somebody may have not really had any dealings with the property for a long time, or you'd have, let's say, a foreign owner, somebody living outside the country that may or may not be aware of the local property tax, so it can be amassing over a number of years. And you can't pay for it out of the sale proceeds. It has to be paid in advance.
It's very good. Are people a little bit shocked when they present themselves in front of you and they realise that things are a lot more complex with these transactions than they might have thought, Rosemary?
Absolutely, and I recently had a call from a client who was purchasing, and they said quite bluntly, and also fair enough, which is, sure, what do the seller's solicitor have to do except for issue the contracts to me or to you? And I said, oh, look, I get why that is the impression, but there's a load of stuff that actually goes into it. Like, as I said, like, you're not just looking at the legal position, i.e. the legal document. Can this person prove that they own it? You have to check their planning. So you have to check the management company, you have to check services, you have to check boundaries, you have to check all of these kind of things. And planning, I think that was really highlighted recently, Fran, wasn't it, with the Meath couple and the demolition order.
Sure. Yeah.
So planning, the less serious things that you look for planning is maybe the client they purchased 10, 15 years ago, but in recent times they built an extension. All right. They may have been told it was exempt, all right, but you actually have to get an engineer out to inspect and give you a certificate of exemption. And then in the more serious planning issues, like they can be as serious that you cannot actually sell the property, which, for example, if that Meath couple went to sell the property, they wouldn't have been able to, right? Or it can be, and it's an unfortunate situation I had recently where there was just too many bits tacked onto the house to be exempt, that a full retention permission had to be applied for. And that actually resulted in the loss of that sale because it was going to take 6 months. And a lot of people, when they've kind of made the decision to buy, and also in this climate where it's very expensive to buy, they've done all that hard work. They don't necessarily want to wait another 6 months on top of the conveyancing usual procedure.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So it's sort of a cautionary tale for people out there as well, that they probably being prepared before they go into their solicitor would be helpful, and would save them money, I guess, too.
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, if you're at all thinking about selling, right, you really should, as a number one rule, know where your title deeds are, right? Yeah. And then if it becomes more of a concrete thought, get your solicitor involved at that point. Like, there's no reason not to. There's other bits and pieces that can be, got in advance. Like, you have to write to the county council and get a letter on roads. You have to assess services. There's loads of things that you can do without actually having the property being sale agreed yet.
All right, Rosemary, good to talk to you, and thank you for coming in to us today.
Thanks
thank you.
a million,
Good morning
Fran.
to you. That's Rosemary Lynch there from Lynch Solicitors in Clonmel. Now, just a little clarification for you in relation to my chat there with Councillor Davy Dunn. We have no former soldier in Newport who has any ties with the Labour Party or any government party. Our panellist from that area is completely independent of any political group whatsoever, and any views he shares are completely his own personal views. So I think there might have been some confusion there on Davy's behalf as to the panellist in question. So just to clarify that the person... we don't have a former soldier from Newport who has any ties with the Labour Party or any government party, and the panellist referred to from that area, completely independent of any political group, and any view that he shares with us is his own personal view. We'll take a break, back in a moment.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.